Next question is, can you tell us about parts of your training that have been very important to where you are now? So, other than my undergraduate studies, I spent one summer as a young artist at the Glimmerglass Festival and 2 summers as a Filene young artist with Wolf Trap Opera. And in both cases, these were some of my first opportunities to explore what it meant to sing a main stage role. So at Glimmerglass, I sang with orchestra for the first time. At Wolf Trap, I really internalized and understood what it meant to prepare a role from start to finish. The work ethic that required, the workload of taking page to stage. Both of these programs afford young artists the opportunity to explore themselves on stage. And that's a whole other ball game than the coaching room. So taking everything that you've been practicing and applying in the coaching room and in your voice lessons, and then being able to develop that on stage was huge, I think, for my development. And I'm somebody who really learns a lot in context of performance. So I noticed that during those years that I was able to, in the context of the operas and the roles that I was performing, understand more about what I needed to work on in terms of breath or in terms of technique, and also understand at that time what my strengths were. So having the opportunity in those years to really have the respect for what it takes to learn a role and have my first explorations with main stage opera really, really prepared me well. I was also a member of the Houston Grand Opera Studio for 2 years, and I know I'm biased because I consider HGO my artistic home in the US, but I really feel that I got my wings through that program and that I made the biggest leaps and bounds of my development during those years. I feel that that program and those years that I spent training in Houston prepared me to transition and navigate into the professional operatic world. And that came in the form of the incredible coaching staff and starting to take lessons with Stephen King, who I still study with now, and also continuing to be able to explore learning roles and performing roles on the main stage, covering artists who I've respected for years, being in the rehearsal room, understanding more and more what it takes to excel and develop in this art form. I feel that HGO and the studio really gave me the tools that I have now for existing in this industry, and I'm very thankful.